have now to introduce our meditation. Today it is led by Karen Miles.
Good morning. Please join me this morning cultivating the mind state of equanimity. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, and bring soft attention to your in-breath and out-breath, thereby calming both your mind and body. Reflect on the qualities of a mind that is balanced and equanimous. Reflect on the gift-like qualities that peaceful hearts bring to our world. Make these your words. May I learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity. May I be open, peaceful, and at ease. Bring to mind someone who has been a teacher or a benefactor to you. They need not be alive. Make these your words. May you, teacher or benefactor, learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May you be open, peaceful, and at ease. Now bring to mind one or more loved ones and make these your words. May you, loved ones, learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May you be open, peaceful, and at ease. Now let's include in our circle of meditations the beings who to us are neutral, people we see daily, for whom we have neither attraction or aversion, and make these your words. Make each of you learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May you be open, peaceful, and at ease. Your happiness depends on your actions, not forces outside of yourself. Now let's include those difficult people in our lives, those who we might even consider our enemies, wishing that they too find equanimity and peace. Make these your words. May each of you difficult beings learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May you be open, peaceful, and at ease. Your happiness depends on your actions, not forces outside of yourself. Now to all beings near and far, the two-legged and multiple-legged, the winged, the finned, those born and yet to be born, we offer these words. May every being in all realms see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and balance. May all beings be open, peaceful, and at ease. Thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Neil McKinnon. Neil was born at a young age in an old house that is now a funeral parlor. It was June 1941. War was raging in Europe, and Joe DiMaggio was in the middle of a 56-game hitting streak. He grew up in Togo, Saskatchewan, to the height of 5 feet 10 inches, where he stayed until he was 59, at which point he started to shrink. The Allies chose Neil's 3rd birthday to invade France. In 1955, he and a friend left Togo and hitchhiked to Vancouver to seek friendlier pastures. Vancouver was not a friendly pasture for 2 farm boys with only $20, so they went camping in an abandoned car on Vancouver Island. After a career selling encyclopedias door to door, Neil landed a job at the PNE, don't know what it is, where he sold fix-o gases, unsinkable boats, spray shoe shine, aqua filter cigarettes, and one-man pool tables. He has never been a lumberjack, steer wrestler, or prize fighter. He wrote his first story at 10, and it remains unpublished. Quick to speak, he runs down slowly, and people often leave the room while he's still talking. He's very competitive and once won 2 cans of fried chicken in a fishing derby. Neil rarely listens when others are speaking, preferring to concentrate on what he's going to say next. As a devout Gemini, Neil is open to erotic possibilities every year during the month of June. Neil McKinnon.
Somebody spit like a peso. Good morning. Good morning. Is it warm enough for everybody? Beautiful. I was at a meeting Friday morning outside where it was very cold and there was people there dressed like it was 40 below. Okay, I'm here this morning to talk very seriously about humor. And so a lawyer gets on an airplane, goes to sit down and finds that he's sitting right beside a very, very old gentleman. And he thinks to himself, I think I'll have a little fun. It's a long flight. So he nudges the gentleman and says, hey, wake up. You want to play a little game? And the old fella said, no, I'd sooner sleep. He says, no, come on, play the game. It'll be fun. He says, what'll happen is you ask me I'll ask you a question, and if I can't answer it, or you can't answer it, you give me $5. Then I'll ask you, or you ask me a question, and if I can't answer it, I'll give you $500. The old fella thinks for a moment, well, what's the harm? So the lawyer says, I'll go first. He says to the old fella, he says, what's the distance from the earth to the sun? The old man thinks for a moment, reaches in his pocket, gives the lawyer $5. He goes back to sleep. The lawyer says, no. Now it's your turn. You ask me a question. So the old fellow says, what goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? The lawyer thinks, doesn't know the answer. Gets out his laptop, Googles, nothing. Gets out his cell phone, phones some of his sharp lawyer friends. Nobody knows. Says, he reaches in his pocket, I don't know. Pulls out a wad of bills, counts out $500, gives it to the old fellow. The old guy promptly leans back and goes back to sleep. The lawyer sits there, stews for a few minutes, and he nudges the guy again. He says, come on, tell me, what goes up a hill with 3 legs, comes down with 4? The old man reaches in his pocket, gives the lawyer $5. Today I'm going to try and answer 2 pretty deep philosophical questions. The first one is, if a man tells a joke in the forest and no one is there to hear it, is it still funny? And the second one is, do born-again people really have 2 belly buttons? Has anybody here heard of a writer named Patrick McManus? Okay, Patrick McManus is a very funny writer. He actually wrote a book about humor called The Deer on the Bicycle. And in it, he states that humor ultimately arises out of the life, character, and personality of the individual. And he illustrates this point by saying he was born in an old house in Idaho, and it wasn't a very auspicious start because his father got the doctor drunk before he was delivered. I read that and it was deja vu all over again. I too was born in an old house in a small town. There was no hospital. and a retired nurse owned an old house in town, and she delivered all the babies around. And the night I was due to arrive, my mother went to this house, and it turned out there was a house party going on. And she was put in a bedroom right next to the living room where the party was, and she said she could hear people laughing, and there was drink glasses clinking and things like that. And later on, as my arrival became more imminent, she started to scream, and she was yelling, "No, no, no." And she has a distinct memory of someone coming in, carrying a glass in their hand and saying, "Oh, shut up, you should have said that 9 months ago." What is humor? James Thurber said that humor is emotional chaos remembered in tranquility. According to P.J. O'Rourke, there's 3 kinds of humor. Okay, there's parody, where you make fun of people that are smarter than you. There's satire, where you make fun of people that are richer than you. And there's burlesque, where you make fun of both while you're taking off your clothes. We should actually have a common understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about humor. Anybody want to try a definition? Well, when I was getting ready for this, I was able to find 14 different definitions. But the one I think that's simplest and that I like the most is humor is anything that amuses. And by amuse, I mean that makes you smile or laugh. Okay? Some people, some of the definitions use the word happy in the definitions. Now, laughter is actually a physical response to a situation. Humor is the perceptual or the cognitive response to that same situation. It's a means that folks deal with 2 opposing conditions in their lives. And the conditions, the first one is order. This is a condition that's in all our lives. Order, manifested by control, rules, court proceedings, business meetings, war, prisons, asylums, church rituals. The attributes of order are logic, neatness, rules, laws, conformity, rank, authority. It's where we all live most of the time. Our lives are orderly. Okay? The other condition is, of course, disorder. Okay? Disorder, manifested by excess, messiness, revelry, carnival, wakes, anything that's not ordered. Chivalries, stag parties, orgies, April Fool's Day, Halloween, all of those kinds of things. The attributes are jokes, role reversals, sexual activity. Okay? It's clowning. This is where people escape to. Live here, escape here. Okay? Anybody want to try finishing this sentence? The opposite of tragedy is?
More tragedy.
More tragedy. Life is terrible and then it gets worse, right? Let's talk a little bit about comedy. Tragedy has actually been defined as the movement from order to disorder. Okay? The opposite movement from disorder to order has been defined as romance. Comedy actually arises from the simultaneous appearance of order and disorder. When you have both of those things happening together, it results in a psychic shock to your system, and the only rational response to that, sane response really, to that shock, psychic shock, is laughter, humor. Okay? I'll give you an example. About 100 years ago, I was in the Navy, and I was taking a course, and one of the people in our class died, and I was one of the pallbearers at his funeral. And during the funeral, the church was full, his family was there. One of the other pallbearers, thank God not me, farted very loudly. Okay? There was a little giggle here, a little giggle here, pretty soon a little more laughter, pretty soon a little more laughter. Pretty soon the whole damn church was laughing, and I looked around and the family was too. Okay? The only thing, the funeral, very, very orderly, following the ritual of funeral. Disorder, the man passing wind during that service. Okay? The only sane response was laughter. So if the opposite of tragedy is romance, then the opposite of comedy would be, remember I said sane response? The opposite of comedy would be madness. Okay? Humor is harder than tragedy, and I'll give you a couple of reasons. Just buckle these down here so they don't fly away. Funny is subjective. Tragedy is universal. When a child dies, it's tragic no matter what culture you're living in, what country you're living in. But humor is subjective, and we're going to get into that in a minute. It varies all over the map, all over the place. Humor is more complex than tragedy, and I'll just illustrate that in one way. You, or anybody, can pretend to be serious, but you can't pretend very long to be funny. And there is a lot more risk a lot more risk with humor. As a writer who writes humor, I'm well aware of that. Any book or piece of writing can be called not good. But if you're writing a funny book or a funny piece, it can be called not good, like the other one, but it can also be called not funny. There's always a double-barreled shotgun pointing at the humor writer. Okay? That being said, I believe that anybody can write humor. But they can only do that in the same sense that anybody can be a stripper. Okay, what makes something funny? E.B. White of Strunk and White fame says that analyzing humor is a lot like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested and the frog dies of it, so we've got to be careful when we start looking at humor. People laugh at many things, but when you're dealing with books, writing, sitcoms, stand-up comedians, movies, there are really only three. And they are surprise, misfortune, and three, the forbidden. Now remember, I said that's not exhaustive. So academics being academics and not having a whole hell of a lot to do have developed theories around these. The surprise theory, if you like, is known as the incongruity theory. And it states that humor stems from the inappropriate mixing of categories of meaning, the union of two things that don't fit. In other words, the surprise, okay? So if I was to look out on the street there and I see a kid going by on a skateboard, not very funny. But if I was to look out in the street there and see the new Pope going by on a skateboard, that has a lot of comic implications, right? So Oscar Wilde's observation that work is the curse of the drinking class. Woody Allen, when told he is a great lover, I practice a lot when I'm alone. Mark Twain, when I get the urge to exercise, I lie down until it goes away. Woody Allen again, there are worse things in life than dying. Ever spent an evening with an insurance salesman? Have you heard about the insomniac dyslexic agnostic? He stayed up all night wondering if there really is a dog. That's the union of three things, and that's pushing the limits. You have to think for a moment on that one. I don't think you could get beyond that and be funny. Okay, so a situation is comic when it belongs to simultaneously to two independent series of events. And each of those events can be interpreted in two different ways. So a duck walks into a store and says, "Give me some lipstick and put it on my bill." Interpreted in two ways, right? She had a personality that did not allow me to express either my feelings or my fluids. Getting Lorena pregnant was a lot like running the railroad. It wasn't a one-man job. Knock-knock jokes fit into this category. They are surprise. Pies in the faces are surprise. They fit into this category. My all-time favorite is the story about Disraeli and Gladstone in the British Parliament. I'm not sure which one said what to whom, but let's say Disraeli said to Gladstone, "You, sir, will either die on the gallows or of a foul disease." To which the other leapt to his feet and said, "That depends, sir, on whether I embrace your principles or your mistress." We have an example in Canadian Parliament. When the Nixon tapes were released in the United States, it was discovered on the tapes that Nixon referred to Prime Minister Trudeau at that time in Canada as that asshole from Canada. And there was a little bit of a furor because I guess one head of state isn't supposed to call another one an asshole. So, but John Diefenbaker, who was in opposition in the Canadian Parliament at that time, stood up and put it all in perspective. He said, "It wasn't particularly politic of Mr. Nixon to say what he said. However, you have to admit, he certainly does know his anatomy." Okay, the second one is misfortune, and it's been called the superiority-inferiority theory. This type of humor needs a but. It pokes fun at pretensions. It's aggressive. There must always be a winner and a loser. It's Don Rickles type of humor. Okay? The racial jokes fit into here. There is always an element of cruelty. She has more chins than the Chinese phone book. That was Don Rickles talking about Elizabeth Taylor, I think. I'll give you another one. I was building a deck one time, and I was using a stick for a spacer. I was nailing down the 2x4s and keeping them spaced apart correctly with this stick. And I finished nailing and went to pull the stick out, and it was stuck. It wouldn't come. So I grabbed it with both hands and reefed, and it stuck in my forehead. And my wife, who was looking out the kitchen window at the time, killed herself laughing. Okay? It's incongruous. It actually was two. You don't often see somebody with a stick sticking out of their head. And also it was misfortune. Two things. She couldn't help but laugh. For which I've never forgiven her. I'll give you a small example. It's from my last book. 80-year-old Alberto Camelo has just told his equally old female neighbor that he plans to write a book telling the world how it was that he became the world's greatest lover. And I'll quote, "When I told my neighbor Adriana of my intent, she cackled like an ancient whore and said, 'You forget, old man, that I have known you for the better part of our 2 lives, and that we once feasted together on Passion Mountain. If my memory is not riding a lame horse, the feast turned out to be a snack with damp crackers instead of peanuts. Perhaps you are the greatest lover of last Tuesday.'" And the third one is the forbidden. And it states that jokes allow the expression of otherwise forbidden impulses. And in our culture, in our society, those are usually sex, religion, and occasionally aggression. Now, in other cultures, bodily functions sometimes roll into there, okay? So you can have other things, but in ours, generally, the forbidden is sex and religion, once in a while aggression. As a humor writer, I feel really satisfied if I write a story and it's got all 3 in it. I do. I actually try and do that. Okay, what is a sense of humor? let's call it the ability or the facility to be amused. And by amused, it's the ability to laugh or smile, I guess. Okay, everyone has a sense of humor. But if you don't, I say you don't have one. Okay? We say that about whole cultures. I've heard it said about Serbs. I've heard it said about indigenous people, Native Indians. Okay? We say that about professions. We say engineers don't have a sense of humor. Lawyers don't have a sense of humor. Accountants don't have a sense of humor. There's many factors affect the sense of humor. Age, your sex, where you are, your culture, how you feel. That's why audiences have to be warmed up. It makes them feel, put in the mood, right? So, for example, if, let's see, how do you put a giraffe in a refrigerator? You open the door, you put the giraffe in, and you close the door, right? How do you put an elephant in a refrigerator? No. You open the door, take the giraffe out, put the elephant in, and close the door. The lion called a very important meeting of all the animals. Very important meeting. And all of the animals came, except one. Which one didn't come? The elephant. He's still in the fridge. My 4.5-year-old grandson thinks this is hilarious. Age affects your sense of humor. I don't think it's so funny anymore. Right? Actually, it's pretty funny. Isn't it? On average, preschool children, research has shown, preschool children laugh or smile about 400 times a day. And that's generally true across all countries and cultures. Adults across countries and cultures laugh or smile. Anybody got an idea?
10 or 12 times?
17.
17.
17, yeah. So we can learn a lot from kids, I think. So laughter doesn't travel easily across space, time, age groups, and gender. I'll talk about gender in a minute. It is biologically universal. We all laugh, okay? But it's culturally and chronologically specific. I think I could illustrate that. Anybody here speak French? Any French speakers? Okay, you speak French. I need a little help with that. I want a translation, okay? And it's actually the motto of the French Navy, and it's in 2 parts. So I'll get you to translate the first part, okay? The first part of the motto is, to the water.
Hello.
Hello. Good, okay? And the second part is, it is the hour.
C'est l'heure.
So the motto of the French Navy is, hello, sailor? Okay, I did that for a purpose. My son-in-law's father immigrated to Canada from France. He does not see any humor in that whatsoever. Okay, now that I've said that, I want to say there's always exceptions. Does anybody know who the world's most watched and hence most popular comedian is? Yes. No. Is, not one that's... What? I can't hear you. No. I'll tell you. It's a gentleman named Mark Roswell. Has anybody ever heard of him? Mark Roswell is from Toronto, Canada. And the first time he was on television, he had an audience of 500 million people. Mark Roswell lives in China. He has his own program there. And if he hasn't perfected, he's come very close to perfecting a form of Chinese humor called crosstalk. And he's wildly popular there. Okay? He is the most. Nobody has the audience that he has. Okay, I talked about humor not traveling easily across time. but as I said, there's always exceptions. A 1600-year-old work called Philogellus, the Laugh Addict, which is Greek, is the world's oldest joke book. Okay? In it, a man complains that a slave he has just bought has died. By the gods, answers the slave seller, when he was with me, he never did any such thing. It then goes on, and it's almost word for word the dead parrot sketch from Monty Python. Okay? That humor has traveled across 1,600 years, and we still find it funny. And Monty Python wasn't original with that. However, there's a joke in the same book about lettuce that doesn't resonate at all until you realize that 1,600 years ago they thought lettuce was an aphrodisiac, and then it makes sense. Things that were once serious now become funny. We'll turn it around. So things that used to be serious are now funny. And generally we're talking about out-of-date practices, customs, and laws. And I'll just give you a few. In France, it is forbidden to call a pig Napoleon. In England, it is still legal to murder a Scotsman within the ancient city walls of York, but only if he is carrying a bow and arrow. In Vermont, women must obtain written permission from their husbands to wear false teeth. In Florida, it is illegal to have sex with a porcupine. It's probably damned uncomfortable, too. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about male versus female humor. A book called I'm With Stupid, it's written by Gene Weingartner and Gina Barreca. I want to read a quotation from Gina Barreca to you. A woman's sense of humor is complex and layered. Situational, juxtapositional, implicit, absurdist, and internally referential. A woman wants an extended experience, a kneading, rolling, stroking experience. It is based on an appreciation of the human condition, whereas a man's sense of humor is based upon the concept that farts are funny. Men talking to men laugh a lot. Women talking to women laugh a lot. Men talking to women, the women laugh more. Okay? Men like women who laugh. Okay? I think they do that because men are more ridiculous. That actually holds across cultures and countries as well. And another thing, when they looked at children, almost invariably, almost 100%, not quite, but almost, the class clowns among small children are almost always boys. In personal columns, women advertised for men with a sense of humor. Men advertise that they have a sense of humor. Men and women do perceive jokes and humor differently. This is shown numerous times by both behavioral studies and by brain imaging, functional brain imaging in recent days. And men tend to think in a straight line. They think in cause to effect terms. Women tend to think in patterns. They use details in context. So a male telling a joke, the sentences must be in the right order. It must be told the same way every time, or the cause to effect line will be lost. Okay? Women find that really boring. So, for example, if I'm telling my wife, I say, once there was a traveling salesman.
What's he traveling in? What's he selling? What's his name?
It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter.
Well, where is he going?
It's not important, darling. He meets a farmer's daughter.
What's she wearing? How old is she? What's she doing?
That's when I go look for the remote and see if there's anything on TV. It's my wife, Judy, by the way.
What's she wearing?
And why does she keep interrupting me? I want to just illustrate this the other way around. Judy was on the bus from Chapala, or from Ajijic to Chapala one time, and two very hefty Mexican ladies got on the bus and they were arguing very loudly. And pretty soon, they were standing in the aisle of the bus punching each other. Now, I think that's just filled with comic implications. There's humor there like crazy. But when Judy tells the story, it drives me bananas, because she tells people why she was at the bus stop, what bus stop it was, the reason she was going to Chapala, where she got off the bus, where the ladies got off the bus. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with what's funny, right? Okay, laughter is the best medicine. Humor is infectious. It's more contagious than any flu or cough. And it's fun, it's free, and it's easy to use. Okay? What happens when we laugh? Well, first of all, we stretch the muscles in our body, starting with the face. Our pulse and blood pressure go up. We breathe faster, and we send more oxygen to our tissues. Sounds exactly like sex, right? Okay? Just think, you can get the same benefits just by laughing. 1 minute of hearty laughter gets a heart rate to the same level as 10 minutes on a rowing machine. 10 to 15 minutes of laughter burns 50 calories. So it'll take you a whole hour to get rid of one McDonald's muffin. It's not a great way to lose weight. What are the benefits? It boosts your immunity system. It helps increase your immune cells. It lowers stress hormones. It decreases pain. It triggers the release of endorphins, which are the body's feel-good chemicals. I used to be a long-distance runner, and I used to go through a lot of pain to get those endorphins released and experience that runner's high. Now I find I could have just stood at the start line and laughed at all the other runners. It relaxes your muscles for up to 45 minutes. It prevents heart disease. It promotes healing. And it improves pain tolerance to the point where lots of patients can reduce medications, depending on what's wrong with them. There are mental health benefits to laughter. It adds joy and zest to life. It eases anxiety and fear. It relieves stress, as I said. It improves mood, and it enhances resilience. Laughing helps you bounce back when things go wrong. There are social benefits. It strengthens relationships, attracts others to us, enhances teamwork, and helps diffuse conflict. It also promotes group bonding. 87% of serious cancer patients use some form of complementary intervention. The two most common, in order, are humor and prayer. Okay? Most of the patients interviewed believed that humor played a role in their spirituality and their perception of life. And humor also enhances the doctor-patient relationship, which is fraught with stress, apparently. Okay, how do you bring more humor into your life? Well, first of all, start smiling. That's so easy in this country. If you're walking down the street and you smile at somebody, they invariably smile back at you all the time. If they don't, you know they're from Vancouver. Count your blessings. No, I actually wrote that in a piece in the Vancouver paper one time, and I damn near got crucified. Count your blessings. Just making a list or thinking about what's good in your life distances you from negativity. Spend time with people who like to laugh. That means do not hang around people who grouse, or especially people that take themselves too seriously. Okay? And I'll tell you two of them to stay away from: golfers and poets. Bring humor into your conversation, but use discretion. When your spouse complains that you have no taste, is not the time to tell her how much you love her. look for funny things. Some of you have probably seen these. I collect newspaper headlines because I just think you can hardly read a newspaper without finding humor. So I'll just read these to you because you obviously can't see them. This is from a Vancouver newspaper. It states, the headline is, Viagra found to help hamsters recover from jet lag. Here's one from a Calgary paper. Bylaw would prohibit sex for cats without permit. And here's one from our local reporter. It's actually an ad for Roberto. And last year, Roberto's had a Hawaiian night, and they had dancers, traditional songs by real Hawaiian musicians, an incredible luau buffet with lava rock, roasted pork, luau chicken, crispy fish and fruit glaze, coconut shrimp, seared ahi, hula rice, and more. Plus, a lei for everyone, spelled L-A-Y. Okay, the other way to bring more humor into your life is get out, for God's sake, and meet people. Laughter is actually 30 times more likely when you're in a social situation than if you're sitting at home. And I can't even think of why you laugh sitting at home unless you were watching a sitcom or something. Laugh at yourself. We're all absurd. Okay? Laugh at situations rather than complain. Judy and I were in a little Mexican town not far from Puebla one time, and we went into a restaurant for lunch, and there was a couple, a gringo sitting there, and they asked if we would like to join them. We said, yeah. And in a few minutes, the guy was yelling loudly because he couldn't get a martini with his lunch. Can you imagine? Oh, by the way, he was also from Philadelphia. Keep things in perspective. The world is a very, very heavy thing. And deal with your stress. Start drinking at breakfast. Emulate your kids. Kids know more about laughter than we ever did. Maybe when we were kids. I'll tell you, that 4.5-year-old grandson I mentioned a minute ago, his father has taught him where the chess pieces go on a board and how they move. Now, he's not exactly a grandmaster, but he does know how to move pieces. So I was playing with him one day, and all of a sudden it was like a light bulb going on. He ran to his toy box, and he got a little tractor with a little shovel on the front of it, and he positioned it on the board, and he maneuvered it around, and then he pushed my king off the board and said, I won. A checklist for lightening up. Is it worth getting upset over? Is it worth upsetting others? Is it that important? Is it that bad? Is the situation irreparable? Is it really your problem? Okay, I'll answer the two questions I started with. If a man tells a joke in the forest and no one is there to hear him, is it still funny? The answer is yes. A joke does not become not funny until his wife has heard it twice. And the second question, do born-again people really have two belly buttons? Really? No, of course, it's ridiculous. Only Buddhists have multiple belly buttons. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. I don't answer questions that other people ask. I only want to answer the ones where I know the answer to already.
Well, I can start off with one. You've heard of laughter yoga.
Yes. Oh, laughter yoga benefits. I meant to mention that.
Oh.
Laughter has all the benefits I mentioned in here. Laughter yoga has the same benefits to not quite the same degree. So forced laughter works, but not, according to research, not quite as much as spontaneous cracking up does.
Well, I guess the question is,
I told you, I only answer the ones I know.
all right, well, maybe our audience really hasn't heard of it, and we have a group that practices laughter yoga here. So it doesn't have any kind of joke to inspire the laughter. The idea is, and this is a worldwide movement, you should see them in Japan laughing, different kinds of laughter, belly laughter, guffaws, hee-hees, and all this stuff that exercise different benefits, I suppose.
Yeah.
But no joke.
Well, Judy, my wife, was on an airplane coming down here, I believe. Was it coming here?
Yes.
And she happened to sit by some people who are practitioners of...
Vancouver, they're from Vancouver.
So they don't know how to crack up. They got to force it, right? Practitioners of laughter yoga, and they actually got the entire plane going. The stewardess let them stand up and do it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Any questions?
Nobody else? Of course, Rosemary. Wait for the microphone.
Oh, hold it this way. This way. I got it right? Okay. I just want to know how you classify Newfie and Polish jokes.
Oh, those are... There's a but to the joke. Polish and Newfie jokes, any kind of racial joke, if you like, is classified under misfortune. Yeah, yeah. It's the same as the Don Rickles type humor. There's always an element of cruelty. I'll tell you, actually, I hope there's no Newfoundlanders here. I got to tell my favorite Newfoundlander. I was sitting in a bar with about 3 or 4 people one time, and one of the guys started to tell a Newfie joke. And the other guy stopped him. One of the other guys sitting at the table stopped him and said, "Just a moment, before you go on with that, I want you to know that I'm from Newfoundland." And just like that, the other guy said, "That's okay, I'll go slow."
Thank you, Neil. I really did learn a lot. And I wonder, have any studies been done? I find as I've aged, I have a better sense of humor because I see how ridiculous it is to try and think we have any control. And so I wonder, I know the children laugh a lot,
Yeah.
but I laugh a lot myself. And as you said, I stay with people who are humorous. But I wonder.
I don't know if there has been, and if there hasn't, I don't know why not. I do know that they've looked at children's laughter, and that's what I found. I'm quite sure, I didn't do an exhaustive search for all of these things, but I'm quite sure that's been looked at too. Yeah. Anybody else?
I think that your joke where the punchline was the person was from Vancouver, that was surprise, right? What if they're Polish?
Some people from Vancouver might think that's cruel. You think it's incongruous, do you? I used to run around Stanley Park and I'd say hello to everybody I meet, and most people.
I would just like to know if Roberto's is still offering the special.
True story, I'm going there for lunch.
Neil, Margaret Van Every and I take exception to your remark that laughter doesn't, that boring people are golfers and poets.
We do.
Instead, we believe that it should be read golfers and archaeologists. What did you do in your past?
I think the fact that you take umbrage to this proves my point. Mark's a poet.
Another comment or question? No, there's a hand. John, can you catch something?
Somebody over there.
Why don't cannibals eat clowns?
Because they taste funny.
That tastes funny.
I like that.
Any more hands?
Well, I do.
Oh, here's one.
Go ahead. I ultimately have one.
I'd like to tell a joke and just sort of take a poll as to who thinks it's funny or not and why. This was told in a bar in Victoria, and the joke is how many Native Indians does it take to change a light bulb? Well, it takes 4, 1 to hold the light bulb and 3 to drink until the room is spinning around.
That is definitely a racial joke.
But the interesting point that was made in the paper that this was told by a Native Indian woman.
Well, of course.
And so I'm just curious of your comment about that. Where
Well,
do jokes stop being funny because it's not politically correct?
Well, she's obviously, people can tell racial jokes if they belong to that racial group. They can get away with tons of stuff that you couldn't if you're outside it, in public. But also, as I said, people must have your sense of humor. So if I start to tell a racial joke in a group of people that all feel it's politically incorrect, it won't be funny at all. In a sense, being funny is outside your control, always. It's the recipient that controls whether you're funny or not. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I'd like to know about nervous laughter, when the response is from when you're very, very nervous and you laugh, and where would you put that in what category?
Well, I think, I'm not sure, but I think a whole lot of that stuff that was happening at that funeral I was at was sort of like nervous laughter. But there's a whole bunch of other categories, and I feel that one of them is embarrassment that isn't on there. People laugh when they're embarrassed. We lived in Japan for 6 years, and Japanese women in particular, whenever there's any kind of embarrassing thing, they cover their mouth and laugh. And I don't think that fits into any of these categories. I said these apply to writers, stand-ups, movies, sitcoms, that kind of thing. But there are others. Yeah.
And one here.
I am so happy that Mexican people have such a great sense of humor. My girlfriend, her daughter was having a birthday, and I wanted to say happy birthday, so I said, tell your daughter, Feliz Navidad.
Born at Christmas.
Here we are.
I just think it's very funny, and I guess this has to do with surprise. Whenever I tell people the story of how my first husband, after I divorced him, got his tongue bitten out by a dog, which is an absolutely true story. Every time I tell that story to somebody, they start laughing.
Of course.
And
It's hilarious.
The son of a gun almost died, but it was a true story, but very funny.
It's also here. It's like me with a stick out of my head. Did you laugh when it happened? Oh, you weren't there.
Not to mention any names, but one of the United States high-ranking professional political figures was spoken about after a debate as having excessive, inappropriate laughter.
There's no such thing as inappropriate laughter.
Oh, yes, there is.
It again stems down to what the sense of humor is of the people that are around, right?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. I was a bush teacher up in Alaska. The first time that I got off in First Village, 35 miles north of the Arctic Circle, and then the plane leaves and you're there for 8 months. The thing is, when you get off the village of Noapic, where I was the first time, is only 2 miles by a mile. And there you are surrounded by ice, so you're called the bush teacher.
Yes.
Well, the elders always meet the bush plane. They want to know who's coming in. So they see me come in with very little luggage and no knife, no gun, and no man. Now that's something else. And I'm like, so the first thing they do, and they're very, very much, I swear there's Oriental in them, because they're so calm, and they look at one another, and then they declare what you're to be called. And they said, Lalami. And then they went Suli, which means also Sikanayachac. Suli, and then they, like this, and I said, teacher. See, they didn't, oh, I said, see, I'm here in Mexico, excuse me. And so I thought, I'm going to show them, I'm going to learn their language fast. So I heard that named by the elders, the expression is, Vunga. Vunga. Well, when a bush plane comes in, which doesn't for 4 months of the year, by the way, I better remind you, take enough food. I was really starving for 4 months. Well, anyway, you go to the post office and you always declare your name. So every time the bush plane came in, once a couple of weeks, everyone gathers at the post office. I went to the post office, I said, Vunga, Sikanayachac, by the way, which means in Inupiat, love or can't harm, because I came without a knife or gun. Suli, also, Lalami. Well, 6 months later, my students were a little upset with me, and they quietly said, teacher, you know what you've been saying all the time at the post office? See, yes. Vunga Sikanayachac, Suli Lalami. They said, well, Lalami means white trash.
We have one more over here.
I you reminded me of something. I'm an archaeologist, or I started life as an archaeologist, and a friend of mine went to a very remote community up North Latin, in the community of the plain, walked through the village that was there and went to the site where he was supposed to start his archaeology. And he noticed on the way walking through the town, there was one little tiny restaurant in the village. And so he was out working, and at noon he looked at his watch, he thought, I'll go into town and have lunch at the restaurant. So he walked a couple miles back to town, and when he got to the restaurant, they had a closed for lunch sign in the restaurant.
I don't know if this will work for you or not, but it's a game we used to play when people got too serious. And somebody says, ha, and the second person says, ha ha, and the third person says, ha ha ha. And it has to go around increasing each time. Well, about 12 or 13, you lose count and people start going, ha! And it is as good as yoga laughter, and it's a good way to get a group going that is a little bit too newfie.
Right. It sounds like yoga laughter, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. That has to conclude this wonderful session. You were marvelous. We will all laugh a lot. Our speaker next week is Leslie Strong, a licensed marital and family therapist, professor at Sears. She's going to talk about paradise, or just another purgatory, referring to here. So you won't want to miss that. So now, that concludes today's open circle. Please turn on your cell phones and pick up your coffee cups and stack your chairs. See you next Sunday.